This is a dead man, floating toward the coast of Spain with a briefcase chained to him. Everything inside it is a lie. In 1943, 2 British intelligence officers stood over a dead body and made it a plan. Not part of a plan, the plan. They gave the dead man a fake name, a fake rank, a fake fiancé, fake love letters, a fake overdraft, because nothing says believable British officer like being slightly in debt. An entire fake life stitched onto a stranger who could not object. Everyone knows D-Day. Almost nobody knows that a year before it, the Allies got their first foothold in Europe, using the coat pocket of a man nobody claimed. Then they dropped him in the ocean and let the Nazis find him. And it worked so well that it may have saved thousands of lives. This is the story of a corpse that went to war, and of the forgotten man who never knew he was in it. And I promise you, every part of this is real. Setup. By early 1943, the Allies had won North Africa. Now they wanted into Europe from the south, and they needed a first stepping stone. So they looked at the map. And there was Sicily, sitting right there, right between North Africa and Italy. Perfectly placed, perfectly obvious. The kind of obvious that shows up on a map, wearing a neon sign that says, "Invade here." Churchill reportedly summed it up. Everyone but a bloody fool, he said, would know it was Sicily.
They will attack Sicily. I am not a bloody fool.
And that was the problem. When your next move is that obvious, the enemy fortifies the obvious spot and waits for you to walk into it. The Allies needed to invade the one island everyone knew they'd invade, and somehow convince the Germans to defend everywhere else, which is a bit like announcing you're robbing the bank on Main Street and getting every guard sent to the suburbs. And this was not a game. An amphibious landing against a dug-in, waiting enemy is one of the bloodiest things an army can attempt. If the Germans concentrated their forces on Sicily and were ready, the men wading ashore would pay for it. Every division the Allies could trick away from that beach was lives. You cannot unobvious a giant island. So they were going to have to lie. Big. Not a small fib. Not a called-in sick, the dog ate it fib. A lie elaborate enough to move armies. And here's where it gets ridiculous. The seed of the plan had been sitting in a drawer since the start of the war. A 1939 memo circulated in naval intelligence, brainstorming ways to trick the enemy. It compared deceiving your enemy to fly fishing. And tucked inside was item 28, helpfully titled, quote, "A suggestion, not a very nice one." The suggestion? Plant fake documents on a dead body and let the enemy find it. For 4 years, that suggestion sat in the drawer, too grim and too weird for anyone to touch. In 1943, 2 men finally were desperate enough. And the smallest object in this entire story, something you could lose in a blink, is what would eventually tell them whether it had worked. Hold that thought. Meet the team. Lieutenant Commander Ewan Montague, Royal Navy, a barrister in real life, sitting on a secret intelligence committee. And Flight Lieutenant Charles Chumley, an RAF officer working with MI5. They worked for a body called the 20 Committee. 20, as in the Roman numeral XX, as in double cross. Yes, the British Spy Committee named itself after a pun, and then went home feeling clever about it. This is the level we are operating at. Chumley dusted off the corpse idea. Montague refined it into an actual operation. The concept was simple and completely unhinged. Take a dead body. Turn it into a fake officer carrying fake secret invasion plans. Drop it where the enemy will find it, read the plans, and believe them. Think about how many ways that fails. The body has to look like it died the right way. The identity has to survive an enemy who checks. The enemy has to find the papers, believe the papers, and never once suspect that the whole thing was staged for their benefit. It is a magic trick, where the audience is the German High Command, and if they spot the trick, they now know exactly where you're really going. Most magicians who blow the trick lose a tip. These 2 would lose Sicily. The downside was not just failure. The downside was gift-wrapping your real plan and mailing it to the enemy. Which raised one small logistical question. Where do you get a body? In late January 1943, a man died in London. His name was Glyndwr Michael. He was Welsh, born in Aberbargoed, the son of a coal country family. His father had died, his mother had died. He had drifted to the city with no money, no home, and no one, and he was living on the streets. He died after swallowing rat poison that contained phosphorus. Whether he took it deliberately or ate poison-laced bread because he was starving, the records do not tell us for certain. He was 34 years old. He died with almost nothing and almost no one to notice. His body went to a coroner named Bentley Purchase, and the intelligence men needed exactly what Glyndwr Michael tragically was: unclaimed, unmissed, and available. A pathologist, Sir Bernard Spilsbury, advised that a body like his could pass for a man who had died at sea. So a homeless man who died alone and forgotten was about to become the most important officer in the British military. He just wouldn't know it. Nobody would, for over 50 years. First, though, they had to build him a life, every piece of it, down to the woman who loved him. First, the identity. The dead man became Captain, Acting Major William Martin of the Royal Marines. Why Martin? Partly because there were already several real Marine officers named Martin, so if anyone checked a list, the name would look plausibly real. Hide the fake officer in a crowd of real ones. Attention to detail. This entire operation is one long, unbroken flex of attention to detail. They dressed him in a full uniform, and here's the insane part. They obsessed over things nobody was supposed to see: underwear tags. Because in the mind of a British intelligence officer, the Germans might just check, and if one detail was wrong, the whole lie collapsed. They needed an ID photo, but you cannot photograph a dead man and have him look alive. Dead faces do not photograph like sleeping ones. So, they found a living MI5 officer who happened to resemble him and put that man's face on the card instead. Somewhere in Britain, an officer's passport photo went off to war without him. Then came the wallet litter, the little pieces of a life. Theatre ticket stubs, so it looked like he'd been out on the town. A book of stamps, keys, a silver medal, receipts, a bill from his gentleman's club, a receipt for a diamond engagement ring, £53, 10 shillings and sixpence, because Major Martin was in love, and a letter from his bank complaining about his overdraft, £79 and change, because Major Martin, like all the best officers, was also slightly broke. This dead stranger now had debt, romance, and a night at the theatre, which, honestly, is a fuller social calendar than most of us manage while alive. They gave him a fiancée. Her name was Pam. They wrote him 2 loving letters from her, gushing and worried and real, the kind you'd actually keep in your coat. And they needed a photo of Pam. So a real clerk from the intelligence services volunteered her own photograph to be the fake fiancé of a dead man she had never met. Sure, normal Tuesday. Now the actual point of all this, the secret documents. This is what the Germans were really meant to find. And everything else, the fiancé, the overdraft, the theatre tickets, existed only to make these letters believable. The main letter was written to look like private correspondence between 2 British generals. And casually, between other business, it revealed the big secret. The Allies were going to invade Greece and Sardinia. And Sicily? Sicily was just a decoy, a feint, a distraction. A second letter, from a senior commander, introduced Major Martin as an expert and worked in a pun about sardines, to nudge the Germans, very subtly, towards Sardinia. Subtle like an elbow to the ribs. Yes, the fate of thousands of soldiers partly rode on a sardine joke, and somehow that is the part that worked. And here is that smallest object I told you to hold on to, the detail I cannot get over. They slipped a single eyelash inside one folded letter before sealing it, so that later, if the eyelash was gone, they'd know the Germans had opened it. An eyelash, as a tripwire, not a wax seal, not a code, a single eyelash, deployed as counterintelligence. These people thought of everything, and then thought of a few things nobody asked for. The documents were secured to the body. Major William Martin was sealed into a canister packed with dry ice to keep him from decaying. And Major Martin, who was really Glyndwr Michael, who never signed up for any of this, was ready to ship out. From here on, the British controlled nothing. It came down to one submarine, one Spanish beach, and a country that was neutral on paper only. The delivery vehicle was the submarine HMS Seraph. The target was Huelva, on the coast of Spain. Why Spain? Because Spain was neutral, but not exactly friendly. It was neutral, the way a referee who bets on one team is neutral. There was an active German spy network operating there, and Spanish officials who leaned toward Germany. If a dead British officer with secret papers washed up near Huelva, the odds were excellent those papers would quietly make their way to German intelligence. Spain was the perfect leaky middleman. The British were counting on someone snooping through a dead man's briefcase, which is not a sentence you get to say most weeks. The Seraph carried its strange cargo south, and in the early hours of the 30th of April, 1943, it surfaced quietly off Huelva. Around 4:15 in the morning, the commander, Bill Jewell, sent the crew below. Only the officers stayed on deck. They didn't need the whole crew, knowing they were carrying a body. They opened the canister and lifted out Major Martin. And then, something quietly human happened. Before they let him go, the commander read aloud part of Psalm 39. A burial, a real one, for a real dead man. Spoken over the side of a submarine, in the dark, before setting him adrift as a weapon. Whatever else this was, they did not just dump him. They eased the body toward the beach and slipped away. Now, everything depended on strangers. Spanish fishermen, Spanish officials, German spies. The British had built the perfect lie. They had no control at all over whether anyone would believe it. That same morning, Spanish fishermen found the body and brought it ashore. A British officer, drowned, apparently from a plane crash at sea, with a briefcase chained to him. Exactly as designed. And now, the British had to wait. Would the Spanish hand the documents to the Germans? Would the Germans open them? Would they read that eyelash-guarded letter? And most of all, would anyone actually believe that Britain would be dumb enough to send its top-secret invasion plans across the sea, chained to one guy? Because that was the gamble. The plan only worked if the enemy assumed the British were too incompetent to run the exact plan the British were running. For days, they heard nothing. And then, the messages started coming in. The documents came back to the British through official channels, returned politely, as if untouched, with a straight face and everything. But the British checked their tripwire. The eyelash was gone. The letters had been opened, read, and resealed. Somebody had looked. They had caught German intelligence with an eyelash, which had to be a strange thing to feel proud of. And somebody was exactly who they'd hoped. German intelligence got the documents, studied them hard, and reached the conclusion the British had spent weeks manufacturing for them to reach. The Allies were going to hit Greece and Sardinia. Sicily was a bluff. They did not just take the bait. They took the bait, complimented the chef, and asked for the recipe. Back in London, an officer sent a signal to Churchill. Mincemeat, he wrote, had been swallowed rod, line, and sinker by the right people. And they looked like they were going to act on it. The fish had taken the bait. And act on it they did. German commanders began moving reinforcements. Units shifted toward Greece. The Panzer Division redirected toward the eastern Mediterranean. The garrison on Sardinia was strengthened. Defences spread out across the exact places the dead man's letters had pointed. And Sicily, the actual target, the everyone but a bloody fool island, got less attention than it should have. The one general, who was not a bloody fool, had been carefully turned into one, using a corpse and a sardine pun. The Germans were now bracing for punches that were never coming, in places the Allies were never going. And here is the strange, brutal beauty of it. The best deception is not the one where the enemy fails to prepare. It's the one where the enemy prepares hard, works hard, moves whole divisions, and does all of it in the wrong place. The Germans were not lazy, they were busy. They were just busy defending Greece and Sardinia against an invasion that lived only inside a dead man's coat. On the 9th of July, 1943, the Allies invaded Sicily for real. Operation Husky. The largest amphibious assault yet mounted in the war, landing on the island the enemy had been told to ignore. The landing still faced hard fighting. This was a real war, not a magic trick. But the enemy had been pulled off balance, spread thin, looking the wrong way. The deception had done its job. The historian, Sir Michael Howard, later called mincemeat the best known, and perhaps the most successful, single deception operation of the entire war. Not because it won the war by itself, it didn't. It was one piece of a much larger campaign of lies. But few deceptions ever fooled the enemy so completely. And through all of it, the man at the center of the greatest trick of the war lay in a grave in Spain, under a name that was not his, while the world had no idea who he really was. For decades, that was the end of the story. Major William Martin was buried in Huelva with military honors. A fake officer, mourned by nobody who knew him because there was no him to know. After the war, the story came out, and people loved it. The genius plan, the corpse that fooled Hitler. Books, a film, a legend. But in the retelling, a myth crept in. The body was described as a willing volunteer, or, as some nameless nobody, it was fine to use, a man conveniently without a story. Both of those are false. And this is the part the channel refuses to skip. He did not volunteer. He never agreed to any of it. And he was not a nobody. He had a name. In 1996, a researcher named Roger Morgan went digging in the public records and found the answer that had been hidden for over 50 years. The body was Glyndwr Michael, the homeless Welshman, the man who had died alone in London, with nothing. And so, in 1997, the truth was finally carved into the grave. Beneath the name Major William Martin, the Commonwealth War Graves Commission added a line. Glyndwr Michael served as Major William Martin. After 54 years, the man who never was, finally was. And to be honest with you, because that's the whole point here, a couple of things about him are still debated. Whether the poison was suicide or a starving accident, the record does not settle. And a few researchers have argued a different body was used entirely. Though most historians reject that, and the official records point to Michael. We tell you the debate exists, and we tell you where the evidence leads. That's the deal. But strip away the arguments, and here is what is certain. A poor, forgotten man, who mattered to almost no one in life, ended up shaping one of the biggest battles of the Second World War. He never knew. He never chose it. But his body helped pull enemy divisions off a beach, and that may have meant soldiers who lived to go home. The man the world overlooked did more than most of the men who overlooked him. So that's Operation Mincemeat. A dead body, a fake fiancé, a sardine joke, an eyelash, and a lie so good the enemy worked overtime defending the wrong coastline. Built on a forgotten man who deserved to be remembered, and finally was. For more true stories from the strangest corners of the war, the tricks, the disasters, and the people history almost lost, subscribe. Next time, the Ghost Army, the American unit that fought the war with inflatable tanks and sound effects. There are 2 videos on the screen right now. Take either one.